Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Augusta Baker Diversity Lecture Series. My name is Nicole Cook, and I am the Augusta Baker Chair at the University of South Carolina. And we are so glad to have you here with us today. And so today we are concluding a really amazing series this semester of diversity lectures. And I know some of you coming in the room that I can see have been with us a couple of times. So thank you so much for all of your support. And we're going to go big and go home, as you will, today as we conclude our spring 2021 season of lectures. And we have the wonderful Beverly Murphy and Shannon Jones, who are two of my favorite people in the profession, just really doing amazing work and working in medical libraries. And as part of the series, I really want to highlight folks that are working in different library types, because equity, diversity, and inclusion work happens in all sectors and all facets of libraries. So before I turn it over to our special guests, just to let you know that the chat function is enabled. So please feel free to chat in the box with other attendees. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will be collecting them, and we will save them for Bev and Shannon at the end of their talk. All right, and then finally, before I stop sharing my screen, I just want to let all of you know that we have another lecture tomorrow evening, Friday night, April 16th, the second annual Augusta Baker Lecture featuring author and poet Zetta Elliott, who will be talking about some of her social justice poetry. So please join us for that. Free admission, free registration as well for that. And we look forward to sharing that event with you as well. So without further ado, please help me welcome Bev and Shannon, and thank you so very much for joining us today.
Let me get myself together here. I need to get you all out of the way so I don't have to see you. Excuse me. Well, I would like to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Is that a thumbs up? Thumbs up. Very good. I'm Beverly, and I'm riding today with my partner, Shannon, and we're so happy to be here. I'd like to thank Nicole, our illustrious Augusta Baker Endowed Chair, for inviting us, and Grace for her planning and taking good care of us. People from diverse backgrounds are facing a lot of challenges in their communities and workplaces today. And some people are just sort of waking up to the fact that diversity and inclusion and equity is not just something you can check off a list and say that you're done. So today, we are going to unpack a few things, as you see, but it's going to be a short trip. So we will only use 2 or 3 drawers, dresser drawers. We have a lot of stuff in our suitcases, but we're only going to use a few drawers. But we really like to thank all of you for showing up and taking this journey with us and for being willing to take action. Now, this session is not about the book, but it does frame some of the contextual perspective that we'll be sharing today. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about it. When Shannon came to me with the idea of doing this book, I jumped at the chance because as women of color in a profession that is predominantly white female, I knew our voices and those of others could resonate loudly in sharing our experiences as advocates and supporters of equity, diversity, and inclusion in libraries and librarianship, and it has. This book is a compilation of best practice strategies tempered with wisdom and experience, because no matter how many strategies you have, they have to be put in action, but they have to be put in action with wisdom and experience. We were fortunate to get Chris Bohr from MIT to introduce the book. And for those of you who know Chris, she says what she means, and she means what she says, and we like it that way. So this is not just a trendy topic of discussion, because there are a lot of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, talks and seminars and workshops and everything abounding today. But this is a call to action. This is a call to not just talk the talk, not just write a plan, not just do a statement, but to walk the walk. So action is really our motivation in what we're doing. And we hope that the book is uniquely equipped to provide such a catalyst for doing that. So now the book is divided into three parts. The first part, part one, is why diversity and inclusion matter. The book kicks off with a historical perspective from whence we come, and is followed by an overview of D&I research and literature from 1970 to 2017. Chapter 3 examines the changing face of librarianship, and that has not changed very much, to be quite honest with you. Part 1 is summed up with the discussion of implicit bias and microaggressions, and that was co-authored by Ms. Nicole Cook, and social justice and activism in libraries. Part 2 is equipping the library staff. Authors share their strategies, their experiences, their lessons learned, and challenges when trying to build a diverse staff or when serving a diverse clientele. The question we focused on was, how do you prepare staff to work with a plethora of diversity issues which are commonplace in our workplaces? So part 2 opens up with a showcase of strategies for leading a diverse and inclusive public library, which has different issues from academic libraries, special libraries, and others. The book moves on to a discussion of how to align a library strategy for advancing diversity and inclusion work with the intention, and I mean that specifically, with the intention of the library's parent organizational structure. Chapter 8, which was a sample chapter that Shannon and I wrote for the book proposal, gets to the core of a critical issue, which is recruitment and retention of staff, and especially retention, to increase the diversity of our workforce. And the needle really has not moved, unfortunately, for many years in that area. Chapter 9 offers guidance on developing cultural competency and sensitivity. And part 2 rounds home with an examination of professional development as a growth strategy. We take a different approach in part 3, which is voices from the field. Excuse me. Our colleagues describe their experiences in their own voices with D&I issues in their respective environments. This part begins with chapter 11, where the author offers firsthand experience in building process from writing and implementing diversity plans to recruiting, to mentoring, to tenure and promotion strategies. And part 3 concludes with chapter 20, where an assistant chief diversity officer makes recommendations for improving communication and cultural humility among colleagues in medical education settings. Now, nestled in between these voices, the authors cover a cornucopia of topics, including a journey inside the African-American male librarian, the mind of that, interpersonal relations between minority women in leadership positions, being an other in public librarianship, and we have a story of an EEO complaint from an African-American female in middle management. It also talks about candid experiences with disability and workplace accommodations, improving services for transgender students, faculties, and staff, recruiting Latinx and Native American graduate students into the librarianship pipeline, and tips on creating a diversity committee. We have a great love for the amazing, brave, and courageous contributors who took this journey with us. I was fortunate to be able to really dig into the content firsthand and absorb the knowledge, which raised my awareness in many areas. And we hope you will be impacted by this work as well. So I want to first start out with this. Getting to be a diverse, inclusive, and an equitable workforce will require change. And change is hard, but we have to embrace it. We have to lean in. As I was reading last night, we have to lean into your growing edge. Many of you may be familiar with Rogers' diffusion of innovations curve, which is what you see on the screen. You may be able to place yourself as an early adopter or an innovator. I use a cell phone when I describe this. People who have iPhones, and trust me, I have nothing against people who have iPhones. This is just a good example, but I know some people who have iPhones and they will stand in line all night to get that new iPhone. They'll go to the ends of the earth to get the latest version of the iPhone. They have to have that latest version of the iPhone. That's on one end of the scale. They want everything that's new. They join when it first comes out. But at the other end of the spectrum, I also know people who won't get a cell phone until they drop it, break the screen, the operating system doesn't work. They still want a flip phone. So now they're trying to make flip phones for those people. So we got one end of the spectrum all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And this happens in our lives, and this happens in our libraries as well. We have early people, we have later people, but either way, people are going to have to lean in because it's hard. So we want to encourage you to think about how you will adapt and adopt to the changes in yourselves as you take the DEI journey. We have to look inward first, which is cultural humility, before we can look outward. And we need each other's help and participation to ensure that we will work together as we answer this call for action. So it's very simple. For me, diversity makes us smarter. And those who are colleagues in MLA, you've probably heard this before, and I'll keep saying it over and over again because it's true. Studies have shown that when you have a group of people that are different, especially when doing a task, it's more productive than when you have a group of people that are the same. That's because we grow from the ways in which we're different. And if we're growing, hopefully we're getting smarter. And I'm sure that you have seen this, but I keep coming back to this Verna Myers quote because for me, it's the best and the simplest way to explain what these terms mean. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So you can have a lot of people present in any space at any time. They can even be at the table. But if they're not involved, if they're not part of the decision making, if they don't feel welcome to the activity that's going on, it will not be inclusive. Virginia Lacey Jones, who is an African American trailblazer, in chapter 1 of the book, she explains that in 1935, she attended her first ALA conference. She and other African American students were seated in segregated sections and denied entry into the exhibits at the conference hotel. Their complaints led to changes in policy where ALA would not meet in cities where they could not all attend together. They had diversity, but no inclusion. And in 1948, the Framingham Heart Study, which many of you probably know about, they had 6,000 people, primarily white males and females, that they studied for up to 20 years. The investigators decided it was too expensive and it wasn't practical to carry out the study in other populations. They could apply what happened in a single community to what would happen in other communities. So racial, ethnic, geographic, socioeconomic representation thrown out the window. No diversity, no inclusion. But marginalized communities are not a monolith. There is no one size that fits all. Some of these conclusions were harmful. So in 1994 and 2003, I will say the study launched offshoots that included more races and ethnicities, but some of the damage had already been done by that point. So just keep in mind about diversity and inclusion, especially as you're exploring what you want your library environments to look like and what actions it would take to get there. You have to make sure that this comes together as a package deal. And along with that, the other part of this is equity, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And you may have seen this illustration before as well, but equality certainly has its place, but it may not necessarily always be the solution. Equality and non-discrimination is a fundamental element of international human rights. But let's pretend that someone is giving Shannon, Nicole, and I some new shoes. So Shannon, Nicole, and I, we're getting this same pair, getting the same shoe. Shannon and Nicole wear a size 10. I wear a size 6.5. So we get the exact same shoe. Shannon gets a 10.5. Nicole gets a 10.5. and I get a 10.5. We're not happy. Shannon and Nicole might be a little bit more happy than me because they got a 10.5 and they wear 10 and I wear 6.5. But we were given equal things, but not what we need. Equity would be given Shannon a 10, Nicole a 10, and me a 6.5. That's what equity is. So if I have to sum this all up, I will sum it up like this. But I will say one more thing before I do that. We could just forget the shoes altogether and dance barefoot and have liberty. We could just get rid of all the barriers, and that would be liberation, have no shoes at all. So let me sum it up by saying this. We want to be invited to the party, and we want to be asked to dance, and we want to have on the right size shoes. Otherwise, it's going to be a hot mess because I don't want to be out on the floor dancing in a size 10 when I wear 10.5 and I wear 6.5. Or you could just dance barefoot, like I said, no shoes, no barrier, and that will be liberation. So now this is an example of my identities wheel. And we like to talk about identities because DEI is not just about black and white. All of our identities make up who we are. They make up who you are as a person, your behaviors, your beliefs, your values, your expectations, and your experiences. You bring them all into your library environment. And on this chart that you see, this wheel that you see, the P represents privilege. The P represents where I have privilege in this particular chart. I have to be transparent and say some of the areas of the chart I did not count any privilege at all to a particular area because it would be hard to distinguish what privilege would be in your family as compared to other families. So I didn't do that. But this identifies where privilege is in my chart. So Sonia talks about otherness, inclusion in libraries in chapter 14. And if you've ever been an other in any capacity, maybe you got teased because you had alfalfa hair. Or maybe I'm dating myself. Maybe I don't know what alfalfa hair is. But anyway, you can understand what it means if you've been an other because you have realized you are outside of a dominant group and you can identify with diversity, equity, and inclusion if you have. And if you haven't, that's probably because you haven't lived long enough to get to be an other, because I think that probably everybody has been an other and can identify in some way. So looking at the personalities sort of grasp us into the concept of what this whole thing means. So there are seen and there are unseen identities. They used to say that race and gender were seen, but as we go on in time, you can't really tell by looking at somebody what their gender or race is. So today, people should self-identify about their gender and their race. So it's not totally a seen concept in terms of identity. You can't really make that judgment about people. Some unseen things could be disabilities. There could be somebody who has an unseen disability that it's not apparent. Your socioeconomic status, that might not be seen. Your education level might not be seen. By the same token, there are seen identities that can outweigh what can be seen. I'm seen as a Black female, but not necessarily as an educated person, middle class, family oriented with fish at home. Those are my pets. I have fish. And certainly not an LK, which is librarian's kid. That's a whole nother story, and I can talk about that. But those are not things that you can necessarily see when you see me. When people see me, you see me first, probably most as a Black female. You don't see those unseen things. By the same token, privilege could outweigh other things. For example, being white could outweigh the fact that a person is a lesbian, disabled, or an atheist, because often these are things that people may be oppressed by. Privilege can change, though, depending on who you are and where you are at any moment in time. My chancellor, who is an African American male, is a big man on our campus and in our health system. A lot of people know him. When he walks around, he's well respected. But when he leaves the campus, goes to get in his car and gets on Earn Road in Durham, he's just a Black man. His privilege is no longer there. He's treated like everyone else. Not everyone, but he's not treated the same way that he is on campus. That privilege does not apply. I could also say, if you're not a frontline worker and you've been able to work from home, you could have food or groceries or et cetera delivered. You didn't have to take public transportation. You've had COVID privilege, which is a new concept that I had to kind of get acclimated to. So now on this personalities, identities wheel, the outer wheel may change over a lifetime because they are acquired identities. Any of them can change, and they will change you in the way you react. Your religion could change, your political affiliation could change, your family dynamics could change. Any of the things in the outer wheel could change. The inner wheel is considered to be a little bit more stable, but that doesn't mean it can't change. I will always be Black. I will always be born in this country. But my physical ability changed temporarily when I had 2 total hip replacements. Yes, I have 2 total hip replacements. I'm good now. But at that particular time, my ability changed temporarily. So some of the things in inner wheel, although they may change at a little slower rate, does not mean that they can't change. They could. The things on the outer wheel, maybe more over a lifetime because they are acquired. But anything that happens in your personal identities can impact who you are, your behavior, your attitudes, all of those type of things. And you bring all of those things with you into your work environment, including your intersectionality, which was first coined by Kimberly Crenshaw to describe overlapping and interconnecting social identities, showing where your power comes and collides. So I'm not just an African American, but I'm an African American female. I'm not just an African American female, but I'm an African American female liberal. So all of these could potentially be issues for me as they come together, as they intersect. And the way your privilege changes, the way you have impact changes, the way people perceive you perceive you, that all changes based on this intersectionality that Kimberly has coined. So I want to talk about the 4 eyes of oppression because all of our identities make up who we are. They could be tainted by biases, racism, etc. But some people believe that one group is better than another. That is their basic ideology. And from this chart, that basic ideology trickles down into institutional concepts, into personal concepts, and internalized concepts. But I think it's best described by this cute little video that little Lego video that we're gonna try to watch right now. And let's see.
Experience matters. For over 145 years, more families trust ADT for.
Okay, so here we go.
Oppression. It's a word that's often used as a blanket term, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. There are 4 interlocking aspects of.
I'm sorry. I actually stopped it, I think.
Oppression: ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. And it might seem like a small difference, but it's very important to be able to distinguish between each kind, because understanding oppression is the first step to fighting it. Let's start with the core at the heart of every form of oppression: ideology. Every system of oppression comes from the idea that one group is somehow better than another. Ideological oppression starts when the dominant group associates positive qualities with itself and negative qualities with the marginalized or othered group. Ideological oppression describes the deeply ingrained social root of inequality. It's the larger overarching idea that leads to the isms. For example, the idea that Black people are dangerous is ideological racism. The idea that poor people are lazy is ideological classism. Ideological oppression leads to institutional oppression. Institutional oppression is the way that systems and institutions manifest the dominant ideology. Institutions control access, who is able to get to what and how. This includes legal rights, police practice, access to medical care and education, public policy, political power, and media representation. For example, when women make 2/3 of what men make, that's institutional sexism. When a building is constructed without wheelchair ramps, that's institutional ableism. All of this leads to interpersonal oppression. Interpersonal oppression is probably the easiest to recognize because it happens all around us. Interpersonal oppression is the way that people play out discrimination and violence on each other. It can take the form of microaggressions, jokes, stereotypes, and harassment. For example, when a student is bullied for being gay, it's interpersonal homophobia. When a Muslim person is told that they're a terrorist, it's interpersonal Islamophobia. And all those forces, ideological, institutional, and interpersonal, lead to internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is the way that people with marginalized identities internalize narratives of their own inferiority. It's what leads people to feel less than. This is the end goal of oppression. The oppressive party doesn't need to exert force any longer because the marginalized group is enacting oppression on itself to maintain the status quo. It's important to remember that it's never a marginalized person's fault that they feel internalized oppression. It's simply what happens when someone faces negative stereotypes, low expectations, and ongoing discrimination. So, for example, an immigrant feeling embarrassed about having an accent is internalized xenophobia. When a trans woman feels that they can never be a real woman, that's internalized transphobia. So, to review, the 4 I's of oppression are ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Each of these types are interconnected and completely supported by the others. They can never exist on their own and can even be seen as a cycle. Now that you understand the different kinds of oppression, you're even more equipped to fight it. Don't forget that any effort to dismantle oppression should aim to address it at all 4 of these levels. Thanks for watching.
And thank you for watching that. And I think I just want to say that to me, am I still sharing? Can you still see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you, Nicole. To me, the more dastardly one here is internalized, where people really start to feel a sense of themselves based on this ideological belief. And that doll study was really something that people not aware of, the doll study where they had some African American children pick out the doll that they most identified with or wanted to most identify with. And a lot of the African American children picked the white doll because they had internalized feelings about themselves. So I am going to, in my little part of what I'm doing here, with learn as much as you can about what you don't know. And that includes people. And I'm going to go on to say that includes people who don't look like you. Deborah Plummer, lovely woman, I met her. She came to a session that we had at Duke. She thought everybody had cross-racial friendships, and then she found out that wasn't true. She believes cross-racial friendships will have the most impact on society in terms of DEI, because once you understand your racial identity resolution, you can resolve that process. Then you can begin to examine your racial lifestyle choices and acknowledge and understand your own unconscious biases, and we all have them. This book is about Deborah and her friend Joan, who was white. They were friends for 30 years. They had lunches together. They took family vacations together. They shopped together. They were true friends of the heart, but they never talked about race until Joan, her friend, voted for Donald Trump. Then they had some really empathetic and enlightening conversations about a lot of things. They are still friends, but it was a journey. She shared a lot with us. I wish I could share what she shared, but we don't have enough time to talk about that. But she talks all about this in the book. So I would just say to listen to stories of your colleagues, but don't try to put yourself in their place. Be cautious about making people feel responsible for your feelings. It's not their burden to take that. If you don't have friends who don't look like you, I would encourage you to develop some of those friendships of the heart, Not necessarily friends that you'd say, I knew you in high school and you'd sit behind you and you don't really know each other from Adams, but you're on friend Facebook saying you're friends. But friends of the heart, ones that it would really bother you to lose that friendship. So as I say that, I am going to end my sharing. Let me get out of here and go back. Stop my sharing, and I am going to let my partner take over. So Shannon, you have it. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Thank you so much. And I share in Beverly's kudos and thanks to Nicole and Grace for the opportunity and for the invite to present to you all today. And so Beverly unpacked some of the important concepts and related to identity, and she gave you an overview of the book. But now I'm going to go into talking to you about some best practices for enabling inclusion. And so I'm going to start with just talking about sharing with you all my identities, just so that you know how I'm coming to this work. So, you see up on the screen, I did mine a little different than Beverly because she showed you the identity wheel already. But here's who I am every day. When I walk into work, every day when I'm home, when I'm navigating the city, I'm a Black female, I'm heterosexual, I don't smoke or drink. I was raised in a single parent household, and I was raised by an extended village that included my mother and her extended family. I was born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia. I now live in Charleston, South Carolina. Love military towns. Norfolk is a naval town. Charleston is Air Force. I grew up in the inner city where speaking up for myself was a rite of passage in the neighborhood that I lived in. And so I learned to be an assertive communicator because I had to. Otherwise, there were consequences if you couldn't speak up for yourself. And then I'm a Girl Scout leader, troop leader to my core. And so I am passionate about building girls of courage, confidence, and character, but also about living the Girl Scout promise and the Girl Scout law. I'm also a dog mom. And I will say that Cooper is, I say he's my happy, he's my sunshine. Cooper is the one living being that has really taught me so much about compassion. I was not a dog mom before 4.5 years ago. And I never understood what it was like when people said, well, I need to be off because I got to take my dog to the vet, or my dog is sick. And I just didn't understand that connection. And so he's helped me, Beverly talked about taking your identities that change, or you assume identities as your life stages change. Cooper is one of the identities that I have embraced. And now I've found identity with a whole community of people who are also dog people. So if you're my Facebook friend, you have seen Cooper because he is all over my Facebook page. I'm also, I have my partner and my brother, two African-American males who I care for tremendously. And when they are navigating the world, I worry about them 100% every waking moment, because I don't worry that they're going to go to work and they're going to get sick at work. I don't worry about that. I worry about, are on their way to work or on their way home, are they going to get stopped by the police? And are they going to survive that encounter? Or are they going to be the next Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, or Dante Wright? That's what I worry about for them. I worry about that for myself. And so the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because, as Beverly suggested, identity flavors and shapes the way you see the world, the way you interact in the world, the way you make decisions, the way you approach topics, the way you interact with people. And so you need to know so much about your identity. You need to know a little something about the people who you work with, about their identities. What are they walking with? And so I had to get comfortable with my identities and raise my awareness about the identities of the people that I work with, because when people show up to work and they're not feeling 100%, they're not being antisocial, people are carrying a lot with them because of the identities that they hold. And so please learn as much as you can about your identities, because we're multi-layered people, and it will help you also recognize and be aware of how you show up at work. Now, I will tell you, as a Black female leader, that this poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar that says, "We wear the mask," this is what it feels like to be in a marginalized group and to show up to work and you are hurting because you've witnessed an unarmed Black man be killed on the news, and you have a brother and a partner and a father and an uncle, but you got to suit up and sit on Zoom meetings or show up to work amidst people who don't even acknowledge that these things happen. So a lot of people from marginalized groups walk with pain, but they hide it with a mask. And so you need to know about identities so that you are more in tune with things that are happening in the world, so that you can see what you're not seeing, and you can see some of the harm that people are experiencing, and that they are walking with. And so for me as a leader, I, as a new librarian 20 years ago, I wanted to work for a library system where I felt like my voice mattered, where I felt safe, where I could be as authentic as I was comfortable being, where I felt like I was valued, where I could bring my unique skills and talents to help the library meet its mission. That was the type of library that I wanted to work in, and that is the type of library I have worked in. But that is also the type of library that I have wanted to lead. That's the type of library that I work every day to try to make sure that we are cultivating a space where people can, where they can come and they can be themselves and they feel valued, and they're not walking in a lot of we're not causing a lot of harm when they show up to work. And so one of the things that this has led me to, and this is from Beverly and I, she mentioned we wrote chapter 8 of the book. And one of the questions that we put in there, and I keep this question in the forefront in everything I do in my library, is what impact will working for or using my library for any given time have on an individual's psychological, physiological, and emotional well-being? Because I am here to be a help. I am not here to be a harm. I don't want to be a help or a harm to people, and I don't want working in this environment to be a to cause harm to people. So this is what I'm striving for every day as a leader and as a human being who cares about people tremendously. And so I'm always thinking about inclusion. And so the, Beverly shared her definition of inclusion, and, the definition of inclusion that I really like to keep in my mind when I am thinking about my staff is from the Society of Human Resources Management. And it says that inclusion is the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute to the organization's success. And so that is the type of environment that I'm trying to cultivate here. And so here's some questions that we also built in that chapter, because everybody says that they want to be inclusive. They want their library to be inclusive. And my question for you is, do you really? And so this, and these are rhetorical questions and questions for you to sit with and ponder. What is the racial and ethnic makeup of your library? What does it look like? Who has been sidelined, marginalized, or silenced? Whose voices or perspectives are missing from conversations? Who inhibits positions of power within the institution? Whose voice or perspectives are amplified? Whose experiences and successes do you celebrate, and whose lived experiences are acknowledged and accepted? Which programs get funded and who gets supported and funded? You should be able to answer these questions for your library, and this might help you decide who's being left behind or who's been pushed to the margins. And so that's for your library. But when you start thinking about the fact that none of this is going to happen if we individually don't do the work within ourselves. And so now let's go a little personal, because a lot of us think that we have these amazing, rich and diverse circles, and sometimes we don't when we take a step back and look. So who do you interact with, and who do you follow on social media? With whom do you share a meal? When it's time to go to lunch, or when you're going to dinner, if you're going to happy hour, you're going out for drinks, who do you invite? Who do you invite to your house? And who do you go on vacation with? Who do you collaborate with? And if you get an opportunity to nominate people for awards, and or for jobs, or for committee appointments, who do you nominate? And so you should really take a step back and think about these questions, but also think about who's missing. And one of the things that we've been grappling with, Beverly and I, within in the Medical Library Association, is that we started noticing that no Black librarians were receiving awards in our 123-year history. And so when people say that they support Black librarians, it's like, do you? You don't support us enough to nominate us for awards, or to appoint us to high level committees. So do you support us? Do you go to lunch, or when you agree, if you have a clique in your library, and we shouldn't have cliques, but I got a Girl Scout clique, who do you ask to go to lunch? Or who do you say, well, she's probably not going to attend anyway? Ask the person anyway. And so think about your personal circles, and how rich and how diverse is your circle. And if not, I'm a Girl Scout troop leader. We say, make new friends, keep the old ones. So make some new friends. And Beverly shared with you that cross-cultural friendships are something that, can really be helpful to you, to help you to start learning about different cultures and about different lived experiences. And so enrich your circle by making some new friends. And so now here's some strategies for enabling inclusion. The first one, I hope y'all can see that this bar is across it, but it says check your privilege. A lot of people get offended when people tell you to check your privilege, but they're just telling you to pause for a minute and think about some of the advantages you have had in your life. Have you done anything to actually earn that advantage? And let me be clear, all of us have some level of privilege in our lives. When I'm on campus, I got some privilege as a director of my library. I have some privilege. I sit at tables with a lot of deans and a lot of senior leaders. I have some privilege in that role. Now, if I get in my car and I'm navigating Charleston City, I'm just another Black female driving through the city. And that potentially could be a harmful situation for me. So privilege and oppression works, they go hand in hand sometimes. You're going to have to be able to advocate for someone who's different from you, someone who's had a different lived experience than you. You're going to have to level the playing field for all library patrons. And that's one that I put in just specifically for me, because I work on a campus where we have 6 professional colleges, and the College of Medicine is one of those colleges. And any of my medical colleagues can attest to this. If you have medicine in your realm, they think that they are more important than anybody else on campus. And they think things should be set up for them that others don't get. And, before I came to this library, we had that problem. We would check out lockers to College of Medicine students in the summer. We check out study carrels to them, but no other student could get one. And it blew up one year because a nursing student wanted to know why could she not. And I was a new director, and I had the same question to the staff. I said, why can't she have a study carrel? And it was like, well, that was always the way we did it. It was like, okay, well, do you have a study carrel available? Yes. Give her a study carrel and make today the last day that we have a policy that is not applied the same for everybody in the library. So we've had to level the playing field for our patrons. We'd also, have tried to ensure that all of our library personnel have equitable access to professional development, not just my librarians, but everybody who makes this thing work. So everybody who works here, who helps us meet our mission to the university, needs to be developed. And so we invest in our staff. And that was a strategy that was encouraged by our accreditor, the university accreditors. We are accredited by SACS. And they say, who does it take to make your library successful? And it takes everybody, from the people working at the front desk on up to me. And so we invest in everybody. We amplify the needs of students from marginalized groups. And so I've had to amplify and carry a message forward for students who have accessibility needs, or students who have who wanted a single stall restroom on campus, and their voices were not being heard. And so I as a director, I had to help with that. And so in your roles, you might have to do that at any level. It could be for a colleague, it could be for a student. And then we also, I think enabling and inclusion also requires you to cultivate a shame-resistant culture. And if you don't know what that means, you should read some Brene Brown, because in doing this work, we're going to make mistakes. We're not always going to hit our target. And that's okay, as long as we are learning from it and taking what we learn and moving on and trying to get better, but not making people feel like they don't matter or they are not valued because they made some type of mistake or bad decision or something. So cultivating a shame-resistant culture. Also just a reminder, I love Maya Angelou, and Maya Angelou had the best quote about the difference between intent and impact. And so she says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, people will never forget how you made them feel. So it does not matter what you intended to say. What matters is the impact of what your words had on me. And so when you have a misalignment of your intent and impact, you should do what you need to do to correct that, because that is the right thing to do. That's the human thing to do. You should never leave a situation unresolved. And so remember, there's a difference between intent and impact. And so here's some 6 steps that I believe are helpful for enabling inclusion. So first one, it starts with you. So we all got to do our own work. We, all of us have biases, and even those of us who are doing this work and trying to be good at doing this work and trying to be the best humans possible, we got biases. And so you should head over to Harvard Implicit and take the implicit, project Implicit, to take the implicit bias test to see what your tendencies are, to see, you should know as much as you can about your triggers and what makes you tick, so that you know when those things are bubbling up to the surface, so that you can try to manage them before things come out. So it starts with you. You have to do this work, and you have to do it for you, and you have to do it for the people around you. You also have to own your stuff. And by owning your stuff, I mean, acknowledge that you have gotten some things based on the privilege, based on who you are. And that's just the way it is. But you also need to understand that sometimes what we do impacts others. If you have people in your environment and you say, oh, well, that's how they are because they are mean and nasty, that is not acceptable. That is never acceptable. One of the things that Brene Brown says is that we have to stop pretending like what we do doesn't impact people. And so it is not good enough to say, well, you know, don't worry that Jane does that, because that's just how Jane is. You know how she is. No, that's not cool. Jane has to bring her best self to work, at least bring her representative and leave the bad parts of her or her bad attitude at home. And so we have to own our stuff. We have to know what works and what does not work. Like I know for myself that sometimes my face and the words coming out my mouth don't align. And so if you've ever seen that meme that says controlling my tongue is no problem, it's my face that needs deliverance, sometimes those don't match up. I know that about myself, and so I work on that. And so the next thing is decide if you want to be an ally, an advocate, or an accomplice. Now, an ally is someone who is not the target of a particular oppression, but they still work to end it. An advocate is a person who publicly supports a change or a policy. And then an accomplice is someone who supports the target of oppression when they are going out on a limb. And so sometimes it is risky for me as a Black woman to go out on a limb because the risks are a little greater. And that's just the reality. And so sometimes we need our white counterparts, our white allies to step up, because sometimes the risk for you is not as great as it is for me. But for me, I want accomplices. I need someone who's going, you know, they're going to drive the getaway car with me, who's going to be right there with me. So if you choose one of the three, but you know, work towards becoming an accomplice, because if some of our counterparts get in the game, then that we can, you know, we might be able to start turning the tide on this. The next one is be willing and prepared to engage in I lost the word, in crucial conversations. And so we're gonna have to have some difficult conversations, because sometimes our cultures and our identities and our differences of opinion, they just clash. And we got to talk about them. And we have to lean into that discomfort that sometimes we feel when we have to broach a topic that is uncomfortable. A lot of us are uncomfortable being uncomfortable, but we got to get comfortable with that, because you cannot leave these conversations or things unsaid. You know, I had a instance this year where I walked into a unit here on campus. And when I walked in, I had my mask on, and they said, "Oh, you must be here to get the trash." And thought, okay, I don't know where that came from, but the person didn't correct it in the moment when they witnessed it. And I really felt some type of way. And so now we had to go back and we had to have a hard conversation, because I sure reported it, but we had to have a hard conversation, and we got to get comfortable with that. The next one is see something, say something, do something. If you're going to be a bystander, or you're going to be an ally, you're going to be an accomplice or advocate, you cannot let things go down in your presence and not say something or do something. You know, if you are in a marginalized group and things have happened to you, sometimes you are so stunned in the moment and lost for words that you can't find the words in that moment. But if there are people around you and nobody says anything, that is a problem. That's a problem. So if you see something, say something, do something about it. And then, you know, number 6 is commit to ongoing development, because we're not going to get good at this overnight. You know, it's not a one and done. You're a work in progress when it comes to this. So I have a slide later on that will talk to you, that will show you just some examples of things that you can do. And next thing is just, I love Tyler Perry. One of the things he talks about is helping people cross. And when he, in 2019, he got the BET Icon Award. And in his acceptance speech, he talked about how he uses his privilege to help people cross. So with his movies, he helped, you know, he helped his mother go from pain to laughter. And now he talks about helping Taraji Henson and helping Idris Elba get jobs when they could not get hired in Hollywood. And so I ask you, how are you using the privilege that you hold, the privilege that you hold? Are you helping people to get employment or get nominated for committees or awarded or or nominating them for awards? Are you helping them to navigate difficult situations and conversations? So what are you doing with your privilege? Just some inclusive practices. And so first thing, ask people what they need to be successful, and then do something about it. Tell your story and then listen to the stories of others. Invite a diverse group of people to the decision-making table. We see things at different rates and at different levels in your library. So you should always have a representative body of people thinking about situations, thinking about solutions, trying to come up with creative solutions to any challenges that you have. But you can't have just librarians doing it, because the librarians don't see everything that someone working at the front desk does. So a diverse set of people. Also disrupt the us versus them narrative that you might have going in your library. So I try to refer to everybody who works in my library as information professionals, because that's what they are. Everybody is an information professional. And of course, appoint, nominate, recommend, sponsor, recruit, hire, retain, promote, and reward. If you hire people of librarians of color, pay them, do things to retain them, invest in them, help them get promoted, and then pay them a fair, equitable salary. Don't pay them $20,000 less than the librarian sitting right next to them. Also just, and some of these, they sound so simple, but all gender friendly bathrooms. Had to go through war to get that single star restroom in the library space. Provide lactation rooms. Librarians like to drink. I know y'all know this because y'all go to conferences. Not everybody drinks alcohol. Always have an option for people who don't drink. Everybody don't like to go to receptions and parties at conferences either. So, or just, they just don't. Provide spaces for people to disconnect, because some people just can't handle all of the noise and the big crowds. Use the microphone. I had to get, I was one of those people that would say, oh, I can shout, you can hear me without the microphone. No, people need the microphone. There's an ADA thing. Use the microphone. Use gender neutral language. If people have their pronouns and they want you to use them, please use them. And then learn to pronounce people's names. I was an English major in college, and I had to learn how to pronounce names that I never thought I would. But if I could do that, you can learn how to pronounce Latasha, Natasha, Shaniqua. You can learn how to pronounce people's names. Make an effort. And then your actions speak louder than words. Don't put out a diversity statement or a solidarity statement if you're really not ready to do the work. Hold people accountable for bringing their manners to work. Because again, it's not good enough that, oh, that's just how she is. They need to bring their manners to work. And so for some people, they need to send their representative to work and leave their real selves at home, because we want manners when they come to work. Pay attention to the accessibility standards for your virtual and physical spaces. If you've, JJ Pianki always talks about the accessibility walkthrough, so I want to give that shout out to him. And you should always be doing accessibility walkthroughs just to see what it is like to navigate your space, whether that is your website or your physical space. I'm a big girl, so purchasing furniture, accommodate a variety of body types. One chair is not going to fit everybody. But you got to think about some of these things when you're buying new furniture. Factor in diverse dietary needs, because we don't all eat the same thing. And then probably the most important of all of these is for you to acknowledge and address the impact of workplace Amy Coopers. Now, just in case you all don't know who Amy Cooper is, Amy Cooper called the police on Christian Cooper in Central Park in New York, and she made up a story that he was causing harm. I believe that there are Amy Coopers in every one of our workplaces, and they are making the lives of people from marginalized groups very difficult, because they don't like how they do this thing. I don't like how she does this, or I don't like how they do this, or he does that. You have to get the Amy Coopers under control, because just because I don't do something the way you would do it does not mean the way I accomplish a task is not a good thing. So get ahead of the Amy Coopers in your workplace, because they are there. And just there's so many things you can do to be to feeding your brain and changing your perspective and growing your skills. You can read, you can watch, you can attend something. You need to always be trying to develop your skills. You still got to act, but always developing your skills. And then you got to, do something about, because, once you know better, you do better. And last but certainly not least, Audre Lorde says that caring for yourself for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare. When you get into doing this equity, diversity, and inclusion work, it's hard. This is hard work. And so you got to take care of yourself, your mind, body, and soul in doing this work, because there are going to be some days where you're going to feel like giving it all up, but you cannot. So take care of yourselves. And then I'm going to leave you with this quote from Michelle Obama. It says, let's invite one another in. Maybe then we can begin to fear less, to make fewer wrong assumptions, to let go of the biases and stereotypes that unnecessarily divide us. And that is from her book, Becoming. If you have not read it, you should read it. And thank you. And I think it's right at 5 o'clock. So I tried to go through that as fast as I could. And so we'll take any questions that anybody has, if anybody has any questions now.
Thank you. Just amazing. Shannon and Beverly dropped the mic not only on today's presentation, but also I think this is the perfect way to end our series this semester. And just, as our speaker said, get to know other people, get to know what they're going through. This is empathy. This is cultural competence. This is just being a good human being. So I think that, particularly the practical tips, and you can see that these are not, grand sweeping gestures. Like, these are small everyday actions that make such a difference. So with that said, I know we're at time, so I want to be respectful of people's time, but we can hang out for a few minutes and I will keep this on the recording.
We're here.
So if people have questions, please feel free. But you were getting so many kudos. You were getting amens. I know some of us were doing a church wave over here. So just really powerful. And thank you so very much.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer anything that you have. If anybody wants to buy a copy of the book, we can get you a discount code.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
and I can put that on the website, for as long as you would like, and I will put that up with the video that Beverly showed, the 4 Eyes of Oppression with the Legos. We have the poem, Paul Laurence Dunbar. So we've got lots of resources. So please check back on the Baker Diversity Lecture website next week for some of that information.
Oh, and one other thing. So we talked about this book, but we just signed a contract for our next book, which is going to be Cultural Humility in Libraries. And so we'll be putting the call out for that real soon. And I'll send Nicole the flyer, and then she can send that out to everybody, the code. That way you can get, I think it's a 30% discount, I believe it is. And so we'll definitely get that out to you.
We're really excited about this next book too.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited about it. But no, thank you so much again for the opportunity. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
We have 2 quick questions.
I just want to put up our little thank you. So
yeah.
See our little thank you.
Someone wanted to know if they can contact you, whether you are comfortable providing email, social media, or what have you.
Absolutely.
Sure.
All of the above.
Okay. And then Lucy is asking, if you are a minority in your workplace, how do you start the conversation about diversity with your colleagues?
Start the conversation. There's no better way than to start. You might want to do a little homework first.
Yeah,
so that you,
I don't think the minority, I don't think that person should have to start the conversation. I feel like if you, for instance, if I were to hire a person that navigated our campus in a wheelchair, we would know that coming in, and we would start having conversations with that person before they get here, so that one, we could make sure that we are set up to help them be successful, and set up in a way that we can be successful with onboarding them. And so I think that you got to start having, when you hire people, you got to start having that conversation before they get there, not just, what, do they got their HR benefits? Do they, do they got their health insurance? But, again, that question, what are you going to need to be successful?
And I missed the minority aspect in that question, because it is a welcoming environment that you should be creating before they even come.
But no, but yeah, and if you are someone who's a veteran, who's been there in that space, I know sometimes we often say that, that our white counterparts, they got to do the work themselves, but we see what that has got us. And so sometimes we can't lean back. And so sometimes we're going to have to be the person who brings the conversation up. And, and what I would say to you is that just be brave. I keep a quote on my desk at home that says, "Speak even if your voice shakes." And so sometimes so when I was, when I walked into the space and she said to me, "You must be here to get the trash," I grappled with that for 2 weeks. But then I decided, you know what, I gotta say something, because we got Black students here, we got Black faculty, we got Black staff. And I sat down and I wrote an email and I sent it to the Chief Diversity Officer. And I said, you know what, I've been microaggressed before. But what I don't like is that even if I were the housekeeping staff, and I have a lot of respect for the housekeeping staff, my grandmother was one. I did not like the fact that I walked into the space and the first thing out of her mouth was, "You must be here to get the trash." Not even a, "How you doing?
Hello.
How may we help you?" Not even that level of respect. And so sometimes we have to go out on a limb and say something and push back. So it just depends on, if they're new, I would want, as a leader, would want to start that work before they got there. But if you're there, you might have to push and bring it up yourself.
And I would say, culture taxation is real, but if not you, who? And if not now, when? Because, it happens all the time. I just had a coworker say to me yesterday, "Well, I don't want to feel like I'm burdening you." But if I'm the only one that you can come to and ask, and you feel comfortable to do that, and I feel comfortable to tell you, then why not? Because it's just, I know you're going to do your work. But some things, sometimes we want to say, well, this is not their responsibility. Well, everybody's going to do their own work. But the key word is grace. We have to have grace in this situation and everything we're doing. Grace is unmerited favor. You just get it just because you're not owed to it. You didn't do anything to deserve it, but it's just grace. So let's have a little grace in everything that we're doing.
Yes. And Lucy, if you don't, across your library system, are there other Black librarians, or you're going to have to find you a community of Black librarians? And so Beverly and I are in medical librarianship, and we have a small community within that, and thank goodness we do. Because we have, sometimes we have to vent, and sometimes we have to strategize. And, because everything that we do has to be about a strategy. One of the things Beverly didn't say was that Beverly was the first Black president of the Medical Library Association. And it was a strategy. I just got elected to be the second Black president of the Medical Library Association. And in this election, we had 5 Black women to be elected to high-level committee positions within the association. But it was a strategy. It's we had Underground Railroad meetings to make this happen. So find you a community. They don't have to be within your library. Find you some librarians around, within PLA or within the Black Caucus. We love to have you join MLA and come be a part of AMLA and be a part of ours. Charlotte put the We Here, and hopefully you are in We Here, because you will find community with a number of libraries in the We Here space. So.
And there are lots of conferences, Lucy, like the Joint Conference of Librarians of Color is coming up, I think maybe next summer. But we will get you hooked up. We will get you directed.
Absolutely.
And Shannon said something about strategy, and it is how you do things. It's not always what you do, but how you go about doing it. And we talked a lot about voice and finding your voice and having an active voice, but it is that intent versus impact. There's a certain way that things have to be done to come out on the other end, because we have not arrived. So, we're still wearing that mask, and we still have to be very strategic as how we maneuver our spaces. So we just can't go in and start, yelling and screaming. We'd be out the door. That just doesn't work that way. So we have to strategize about the way we do things. We have to do it in the right way. It can be done, but we have to have the right approach that we take to do things.
Oh, okay. So Shannon, if you can take that one if you want.
Oh, well, no, you got it. JC. I've only been to JCLC, I think, once, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Now that's really going to be my answer. So, Lana, it's a combination of all of the ALA ethnic caucuses. The 5 ethnic caucuses, they come together. And unfortunately, it's not, I can't tell you it's like every year or every 2 years, because it's not. It's roughly every 5 to 6 years. And so it should be, if you just actually, I hate to say this, but if you Google Joint Conference of Librarians of Color, it should come right up. And I know that they've just started campaigning. Oh, there's Shannon, the librarian. They just started campaigning for 2022.
And so, JCLC is good. The Black Caucus also has their NCAL meeting, which
this summer.
Yeah, they're having that this summer. And so they have their conference. It'll be, I think it's virtual. And so you might want to look into that too. And please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're always here to help. My personal mission is that I know that I had a librarian tell me in my younger years that, she said, Shannon, you're not going to be able to solve all of the diversity ills in the world. And she's right, but I'm gonna try to make the spaces around me better and the circles that I travel in better. And so feel free to reach out. We don't always get it right, but I am always actively working to try to be a better person than I was yesterday. And so feel free to reach out if you have a question or anything.
Please do. I've always been active in trying to recruit people into the profession. My whole career has been revolved around that, and fighting librarian stereotypes. That's a whole nother issue. But it's a tiresome journey sometimes with the things that we're doing. But we're that's why this next book on cultural humility is so important now, because we think that it's time for that. This is a time for it. We need to do a self-reflection and a self-critique, because that's the only way that we're going to reach the goals that we're trying to reach. Everybody has to kind of go in now and do that work before we can come together and do the work we need to do together.
Absolutely.
And Martha, my buddy, thank you for saying that. And I think that is one of the reasons why we have to develop friendships and really get to know the people that that are in our circle. And that's sometimes I spend just as much time here at work with the people in the office as I do the people at home. And one of the book that Beverly shared, the cross-cultural, talking about the cross-cultural relationships, I listened to that book on in Audible, because traffic in Charleston is terrible, so you got to pass the time doing something. But one of the things I really appreciated is that it's just getting away from this concept. Just because you, and I'm gonna use a Black person, but just because you work with a Black person does not mean that Black person. That proximity does not equate to intimacy. And so if you aren't, having genuine conversations, asking people how they're doing, like people ask me about Cooper now, and we have a good old conversation now, because we have found common ground. And that's one of the most important things. That's why, getting to know your identities, because, and then, and sharing your stories and sharing your experiences, you'll find points in there where you where you connect, because a lot of times we've had similar experiences, but we just not, we're coming to work, we're doing the work, but we're not, having that human experience of connecting with people in really deep, genuine ways. And, sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, Shannon, let's go to lunch. Because, who can't have a good conversation while breaking bread? And so I think we got to start having, conversations that are a little richer. And so that, like I work with people that I know when they are having an off day, because we have rich conversations and we get to know each other, and we don't assume that if I come in the office and I come in and close the door that, oh, she must be, or that she's just mad with me. No, how about today? Like, and I'll be as completely transparent with you all as possible. I am not feeling it today. I woke up yesterday and I realized that Latanya Jenkins had passed away, and she was somebody that I cared for genuinely in the profession and had a really good relationship for. Today's my mama's birthday, and my mom's been dead almost 20 years now. And today I'm missing her tremendously. And I've been watching CNN. And so don't assume that people are being antisocial, but you should be in tune enough with people when they come in, to know that maybe they got something going on, because we don't know everybody's story. We don't know what people are going through. Sometimes we don't know what they're walking with. And so if you're the person that walk in the office and doesn't even say good morning, you know how that could change somebody's day, just saying good morning or how are you doing? I mean, especially during this time right now where I'm at work right now, but when we were going through COVID and everybody was dealing with something, like you could see tension and you could see that people were not doing well. And if you were meeting with somebody and you didn't just ask them how they were doing, I mean, like really, how you doing? Because we all dealing with something with this. And so I think you just got to get to, we got to have better relationships and better conversations with each other, because then when you bump into something, because some of our Black librarians who have experienced me and Beverly fussing will tell you that we fuss all the time, but then we love each other. But that's because this is a 20-year friendship and we just can't seem to get rid of each other. And so we had those conversations with each other. Like, I can say to Beverly, you know what? When you said X, Y, and Z, I really didn't like that. It rubbed me the wrong way. It triggered me. And she's like, okay, I won't say it again. And we go to lunch. We go to dinner. We still love each other. And so I think you got to have those conversations. So that's
absolutely. When Shannon's bossing me around, I can I still love her. So, and we look alike. But, I think that the cross-cultural friendships is really, really important, because that puts a whole level of diversity in your life that you don't know about. And neither Shannon nor I are really feeling it today, because I found out one of the nurses that I work with, her wife passed away. And and it's all centered around what's going on today. So you never know what's going on with the person, and how just having that grace and saying something to them will help them on that day. You don't have to say much. And I appreciate you, Martha, because you bring up a point that is, some people are afraid because they think that they're going to make a mistake. They don't want to say something. But again, grace is what we have to have. Now, if a person keeps coming back to you with the same thing over and over, they're not doing their work. Something is going on then you can go into another level at that point. But first time, I give people a 3-strike. I have a 3-strike rule. It might be down to a 2-strike rule soon, but it's a 3-strike rule now. So the first 2 I give you, but the third one, we're on our way to another level at that point, because I realized then you're kind of taking advantage of me and you're trying to make me put a burden on me. That's a whole different story that we're going into. So we have to have grace. You have to have those crucial conversations, those ones that don't feel comfortable to you. You have to have them. There's no way that we can't.
And there's a difference between being genuine and somebody just being nosy. There's a difference. If somebody genuinely, I mean, you normally can tell it in their body language, their temper, their tone, when they genuinely care about how you're doing. that there's a genuineness to it. I mean, you can tell the difference when people are being performative because they, you know, they ask the question, but you can tell they really don't care about hearing the answer. And sometimes those people you just got to walk away from because you're never going to change them. You're never going to change who they are or how they believe. And you know, but you work with the people that are trying to work with you. And so, you know, Martha's one of my favorite librarians. We used to share a room at when we go to the conference, and so we've laughed and to the late hours at night. So you know, I know Martha can have these difficult conversations, but they're for all of us. They get difficult sometimes. You know, I told you it took me 2 weeks to wrestle with, was I going to share that I was mistaken for the housekeeping staff, and that the director of that unit recognized that the conversation had went off the rails but did nothing. Mm-hmm. It took me a while to say so, and I did. And I felt good about it, and because it can't happen I don't want it to happen to the next person. It's Brene Brown.
Brene.
So it's BRENE.
Yeah. I think sometimes we have to close the loops on some of the things that we do, because, you know, if somebody's having a situation, let's say they're microaggressed, but then they don't express it to the appropriate parties and they don't take the appropriate action, and they want somebody else to do it, that can't happen. That's like a hearsay situation. That person has to close their own loop in a way. And sometimes we leave these things open, and then the whole thing falls apart. I don't knit, but I've heard that when you do your loops and your whatever that is that you do, if you don't do it tight enough, it doesn't hold together. Mm-hmm. So if you don't close those loops the way you're supposed to do on that fabric, that material, whatever you're making, it's going to shred apart after a while. And we have to come back and close those loops.
Well, and it leaves the person wondering, did they say that because I'm white, or because I'm Black, or because I'm female, or because of my religion? It's unresolved. And so that's why, you know, you're constantly wrestling with, why did it happen? And so you got to close the loop so that you can repair whatever trauma or harm that it might have caused. And the last thing I'm gonna say, and then because it's 5:21, so I don't think Kelsa's on this call, but Kelsa, when she and I, we do a implicit bias CE course for MLA together. And, you know, I talk about Cooper helping me get empathy. And one of the things, and it just never occurred to her, to me, when I heard her say this, but she always talks about being a plant mom. And Beverly is also a plant mom. And one of the things Kelsa said, we taught our class for a group of librarians in New York last week. And one of the things she talked about was how being a plant mom really taught her what the importance of cultivating the right environment is for a plant to thrive. And it's the same thing for humans. And so at work, and I got it when she said it last week, and I've heard her say this 100 times, because now Beverly and Kelsa have gotten me into plants, and I moved my plants over to this corner and they're thriving. And then I decide I'm gonna move it over here into this new environment, and then it starts withering and dying because the context and the setting and the environment was not right in that particular location. And it's the same thing with people in the offices, that the environment has to be right for people to thrive. And so I'm grateful to them for getting me into plants this last year, because it has taught me about messing with the environment and making changes to the environment, and how that change will impact that plant. And one plant might thrive and change. Another plant might die. And so I give credit to Kelsa for making me think about that in that way. But that was just one thing that I thought was just a beautiful analogy, because I know a lot of people are plant people, and they know if they make a change, their beautiful plant will suddenly start dying. And
so see, now Shannon, you're gonna make me add that to my my identities wheel in my family. I'm gonna have to add add plants to the family. There are people who just water plants, and then there are people who talk to the plants, rotate the plants, give them fertilizer. You know, it's one thing to just go and water a plant, but it's another thing to really care for it.
Nurture it, yes.
Yeah, nurture it and make it thrive and grow. My money tree is growing to the top of my ceiling now.
And
So,
she's not lying. I've been to her house. It literally grazes.
oh, it's just the top of the ceiling.
Yeah. So she's done. She has a green thumb. I've been killing plants for a long time until this year. I've gotten a little bit better about it. But yeah, but no, again, thank you so much, Nicole. And thank you all for hanging back and for listening and participating. We appreciate it.
Yes,
we really
thank
do.
you. Thank you so very much. And just to, I think, address something Martha said, and also Teresa Neely, I'm just going to post the link to the lecture website again. So for Martha, there are lots of readings there from all of our speakers this semester, in case you might find them helpful. And please feel free to share any of the resources. They're all YouTube linked and available if you think that this might help you start the conversation, that Shannon and Beverly have encouraged you to start. So thank you all again so much. It's been a pleasure, and it's just been amazing to have our guests here with us today. So thank you all so very much. The Baker Diversity Lecture Series will resume in spring 2022. I hope you all will keep an eye out, an ear out, and so we can continue these very needed conversations in the field. So everyone be well and enjoy the rest of your evening and your week.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.